Everything on. Now I'm very cautious about plugging anything into my laptop. But I've learned a lot. Cool. All right, yay, it worked. I'm Crystal. If you don't know me and that intro wasn't sufficient, you can Google me. I'm currently teaching Mastering Product Analytics at Reforge, so I talk about data and growth. One of the things that I've learned at Gojek is that while you're going through the motions of things, everything kind of feels like intuition and muscle memory. And so if you don't sit down and document, even though people will ignore the documentation later, it's important to do now. I'm also a board member at Naked Wines. It's a wine subscription business, not available here, but in the UK, US, and Australia. And I'm advising a handful of other companies. I also invest in a few companies. So if you're interested in fundraising, I'm happy to provide you advice. Gojek is a company that hopefully everyone here knows, at least for ride hailing. But I moved in 2015 from San Francisco to Jakarta, where I did not really speak the language, but spoke kind of the language. In Jakarta, we do more than ride hailing as we do in Singapore. We had 30-ish services at one point in time. But basically the mantra was anything that you could deliver, buy, or send on a Gojek motorcycle taxi is something that we offered, but we also offered other things which we no longer offer, like massages and beauty services, which never made a lot of sense. And if you would like to Q&A that, happy to rant onwards. But today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what it's like to be a product manager. So as you mentioned earlier, if you're a product manager working on a product, there are a lot of things that you have to consider, one of which is just analyzing the data and trying to be as accurate as possible, or in my opinion, trying to be as incorrect as often as possible. So to first start out, I think we should always set goals. Here's a great image of a picture that Sharon, the ex-CTO of Gojek, once sent me when I said, hey, what data do we care about? And he sent me this picture before I joined the company. And I was like, great, you don't even know what 3 is and 5 is? How am I supposed to find out? But what was clear was that what we really care about is flag booking 2, booking status 4. I have inherently memorized these numbers because I was always typing it in SQL when I was looking up the data. How many of you know SQL? Raise your hand. This will determine how complicated my definition on SQL gets. Great, it's a bunch of nerds in the corner who know SQL. Love it. So we're going to be talking about GoFood today because even though you don't have food delivery here in Singapore, GoFood was a very new paradigm back then. I'm going to talk through the goals itself. So the goals that we cared about at GoFood, just for the sake of this talk, because we don't have that much time, we care about the search to order conversion rate. So everyone right now, for the next 30-ish minutes, you are the product manager of the search bar in GoFood. You care about search to order conversion rates. What does that metric mean? It means for every time you have a user who types into the search bar noodles, how often does that search query translate into an order that is booked? So that means someone pressed order. So there are a lot of ways that this can go wrong, right? As a PM, put yourself in the shoes of that user. You type in pasta, you look at the food results and you're like, I don't really like any of these. I'm going to type in burger instead. So that is 2 searches, 0 orders. That's bad for your metric, 0 out of 2. And so I'm not going to go too deep on food delivery. I think everyone here has probably ordered food delivery. But in GoFood, you're able to type in your search results. You view a bunch of results. So you see a restaurant, and the restaurant has, oh no, a few things on the list. Slight technical difficulties. It's back. Great. Okay, so you see a few things on this list. You see the name of the restaurant, you see its address, and then you see what is a straight line kilometer distance. Anyone who has used the Google Maps API knows that this is a not insignificantly cheaper API to use than a routed distance API. And so even though this is only 1.5 kilometers away, that might be 30 minutes because it turns out you have to go all the way around the freeway. So not a perfect, accurate representation. So if I'm a user and I typed in salted egg and I see a restaurant and I click on it, I see Eat La Melan and I think, great, I'm going to buy this iced coffee, 18,000 rupiah, fantastic. I add it to cart, and then I go to my checkout and I see that the delivery fee is twice the cost of the food. That sucks. I'm not making this purchase. So I exit and then I have a failed search query. Remember, you are the PM of search. How could you have resolved this before it got to this point? But let's say that you are crazy and you love coffee and you were willing to pay this surge pricing, 25,000 rupiah, so that you pay 42K and you confirm your order. That would be a successful order. That would be a good thing. So again, as a reminder, what is your goal? Your goal is to increase your search to order conversion rate. It is currently 17%. The goal is 30%. And in real life, the way that people will set goals is not perfect. You will probably realize this quickly as you join companies. Someone just picks a number out of the thin air, and you're just trying to reach that goal. In our case, what I actually did was call a bunch of similar apps, not necessarily food delivery, but people like, I think Quora was one. It was a very specific company I called. Who was it? I'll remember later, but another D2C company. And I asked them, what is your search to order conversion rate? And they happened to know it. And I was like, great, we're going to inherit that. So I don't spend a bunch of time trying to figure out the perfect goal, because what you want is a directional number that basically says do better. And that is sufficient for now. So the second step in being a product-led, data-driven product manager is to understand and infer. What data points do I have that tell me that this is the right thing to work on in comparison to all of these other things that I could be working on? Because you could work on almost anything in a product. The best way to figure that out is to have your data well instrumented. Instrumentation is a very long thing. I urge you to check the documentation, but to your point, it is better if you run the in-app actions yourself so that you know that the clickstream instrumentation is actually correct. And so we're going to go through an exercise of understanding events, event properties, and triggers. So an event needs to be grouped at the right abstraction. A big problem that people have is they will name events by just whatever comes into their head on the action that you are doing. So a normal car was ordered, or a bike was ordered, or an extra large car was ordered. These are now all a bunch of tables in a database instead of one table called order placed with properties as columns. And so if you're writing SQL, you will know that the latter is infinitely easier than having to union 3 tables and parse through which column is equivalent to one another. So please do not be that engineer that creates three tables for what should have been one table. Let's go through a few examples. So this is for transportation. These are some of the actual event properties we would use. So if a user set their drop-off location, that would fire an event. That event goes into the database as the event name, drop-off location set. For every time the user does this event, you also pick up some event properties associated with that event. So that would be things like, what was the pickup source? So did it auto place your POI, that little ticker, based on the GPS? Did you manually move it around the screen? Or did you pick it from your history? And so that would determine, and a product manager who's trying to understand how people are using the product, which of these features are being used the most, which one drives conversions more quickly, which ones are leading to more drop-off rates, etc. This is how we segment data. So think of an event as a user action of what happened. So verb noun or noun verb, whatever you pick, just be consistent. And then the event property describes how it happened. So how the user selected that GPS drop-off point, for example. So in this case, I'm going to give you a freebie. You land on this restaurant page. You have restaurant viewed as your event. One of your properties is going to be redirected from. And this is important because I don't care about everyone else's ability to land on a restaurant page. I only care about search as a product manager. So I make sure that my product is instrumented for my specific goal. If I need to care about all of the people who landed on a restaurant page so that I know whether or not they convert into a confirmed order, I need to know which orders came from someone who came from search. So question 1, this is a quiz, yes. What columns and values should you see in this restaurant viewed event table? So what are your event names? What are the event properties that you're going to collect? And also, as a bonus, what could go wrong with this data? I will accept raised hands. So if the user lands on this page, what do you see in the properties table? So one freebie is, I should probably see the merchant ID.
The merchant got more than one store.
Whether or not the merchant has one store, no, I will not see that in this table because that is going to be in a different dictionary-like table that has all of my facts in it. That would be like a reference table in a database. My reference table is that static thing that contains all of the information I might need to join later. But for now, I don't need or necessarily even have access to that information when the user lands on this page. But that's a good guess.
Distance from user.
Distance from user. So how far is it? What number would you see? Or what value do you see?
Distance in kilometers or in minutes.
Which one? So in documentation, you have to be annoyingly specific. Every edge case needs to be thought of.
Both.
Both. And how are they separated? Is this a JSON blob? Ooh, painful. Anyone who writes SQL knows that having to parse through JSON data in a SQL database means that someone who was lazy and thought they could NoSQL their way into a database decided to cheat and do it that easy way. NoSQL is just a very lazy, unstructured way. So I would probably do distance in meters. So expand out the kilometers. And then ETA we'll talk about. What else? What other properties?
Time.
The time. ETA.
The time name search.
The time of the search. Yeah, you could do that. You could do the time of the search, but that would probably be on the event of the search query being fired. So think of all of your events as rows in a database. So I searched, there should, yes, by default, be a timestamp for sure. So it might not be here, but I might join that with the search query table to diff the timestamps. Yep.
Session ID.
Session ID, yes. These should all be fairly static with your instrumentation, but yes, if you are doing a native implementation, please capture a session ID. Yep.
User ID and maybe ID.
Yeah, user ID, and then how did they come to this page? So like maybe it would be like a previous page or redirected from again. So you usually want to redo the search properties. As a bonus, because you guys have a group to I don't know, discuss with what could go wrong with that data. How could it be captured incorrectly? Or how might an engineer look at that requirement and say, what's the easiest way I can instrument this? And then it's not useful to you as a PM anymore. So you're instrumenting where did they come from? Did you give them a list of enums of options?
Not yet.
Not yet. So what if the Android engineer says they came from search and then the iOS engineer says search bar?
That's bad.
That's bad. Yes, agreed. The worst thing that could happen is a literal cake decorator. So when you go to the cake store and you say, just write happy birthday, and then the engineer goes and just write happy birthday. So I came across this problem because I did not specify in my instrumentation the minutes, ETA 33 minutes. What do you think happens to the ETA value if it's over an hour? It will probably say 25-35 minutes or 1 hour and 30 minutes. And then what could have been a 2-second SQL query turns into a 2-hour parsing fest of, in case it's under 60, then do this. And if not, parse it this way. So there are a lot of things in the real world of implementation and requirements gathering That is going to add up over time if you do this for every single data value where you're incorrectly instrumenting or you don't have the right requirements. That is just the reality of some of these data points. There are a bunch of other things that could go wrong. The address fields for us were like basically unusable because it was just this long address string. If you've ever been to Indonesia, the addresses are insanely long and not that helpful. And so I wish we had stored like the kecamatan or like the city neighborhood in like a separate column, things like that. But let's say, oh yeah, sorry, I forgot I put this slide there. So if you know SQL, here's what the SQL has to look like versus select the pre-ETA. Like what could have been a very quick thing. Now you have to remember what regex is and which values to use, maybe type it into ChatGPT. But it gets kind of annoying every time someone asks, hey, what was the average ETA last week? And you're like, that's a really hard data point to get. So what if we just don't look at that? And I hear this a lot in companies where the harder you've made the data to access, the less you will ever use it. So question 2, you are the PM. You are now trying to work on this problem. You have instrumented your data fairly correctly. Or you are trying to figure out what data to instrument. What information factors into your decision to place a food order? So whoever ordered the pizza today, why did you pick that pizza place?
The cost of the pizza.
The cost of the pizza. Okay, so you want to know like what's the average price of this pizza place? What else?
The distance.
Distance, yeah, you want it to arrive like fairly within the time you wanted.
Whether they ordered there before.
Whether or not you ordered there before, yeah, like is it like did someone else order this? Do other people like this? I think we have that in some slides. Yep. Discounts. Is there a promo? I love it. Very Singaporean. Okay. So what we chose in this exercise, and this is a real case study, we looked at ETA, we looked at rating, surge pricing, and dish price. Just as a like side story, ratings turn out to not be that helpful. Even though we show it, the number of restaurants that have less than a 4.3 rating are honestly not that many. And so there's not that much of a difference between a 5-star rated restaurant to a 4.3-star rated restaurant. Doesn't really factor into people's decisions that much. If you were below 4.3, we probably would have kicked you out of the platform anyways by then. So we're going to deep dive onto ETAs just for the sake of time. And I want you to now think like a data analyst. You are a PM trying to provide requirements to your data team, or you're a super 10x product manager. You can write SQL, you can pull data, you can visualize it. Try to be that 10x PM. What charts are you going to look at to try to explore the relationship between ETA and conversion rate? Because remember, you care about search to order conversion rates. What data do you need to make sure that this is or is not the right variable for your users to see on the search results page? What do you think?
You can bucket like ETAs into groups and then have the average of the order conversion.
Okay. So you would, what I would term bucketize your ETAs. What would you bucketize them by?
Minutes.
Minutes? How many minutes? So you want them in like bars, right? You're going to group them. So between how many minutes and how many minutes?
10 minutes in total.
Okay.
Or
There. What else?
depends on the UI as well, right? How you bucketize the UI to display.
Yes, if you could just follow the how we bucketize it on the UI itself, how it's represented to the user. If you want to go on the stats side, usually you want between like 4 to 8 buckets, or there are like actual statistical like reasons to do certain types of bucketing strategies, which I think you can Google. But there are actual like domain expertise around how to determine what buckets to use. We did use 10 minutes. What else? What other things would you want to look at? How do you know ETA is the right thing to solve for or not the right thing to solve for? And which ETAs? But no pie charts, no donut charts. Any other charts?
I remember this.
something like relevancy. I forgot the actual term, but
Sure.
how relevant this variable affects the other variable.
The relevancy of one variable to another variable. Yep. So it's probably like a correlation score.
Yeah.
Yep. So you could plot the correlation between ETAs going up and then likelihood of the what to go up, order conversion rate. This one's kind of tricky, but yes, I think if you spend like 10 minutes thinking about this, you'll have to figure out like what is this axis. So yes, you have the ETA on one side, but how do you determine what this conversion rate is? Is it based on sessions? Is it based on number of times the user landed on a restaurant with that ETA specifically? So there are a lot of ways to massage the data. It's probably why you can prove your point anywhere, but yes. So you start out with bins, as this team has correctly answered. So we did 10 minutes to start out with, just because it would be an easy way to just see what currently exists. So the first thing we look at is the happy state. The happy state here, the happy path here is for all of the orders that are confirmed, what was their ETA? Let's just get the lay of the land first, so you know what good looks like. What is the distribution of current completed orders today? And you see what kind of makes sense. There's a few orders that are an ETA of 10 minutes, a bunch of orders within 20 to 50-minute ETAs. Like that seems like a sweet spot in which people would be willing to spend time to wait for food. And then you have just how this long tail of people who are going to wait up to 2 hours to order food. That seems about right. But if I were looking at this graph and I were not very data savvy, what conclusions would I make from this? I might think, well, 10-minute ETA orders, not that many, must not be a very good user experience. Should we cut them all out of the platform? So I'd also want to look at the proportion of conversion rates for each of these bins. So I'll look at for orders or for restaurants with a 0 to 10-minute ETA, there's 100 sessions, which actually isn't that many, right? And then I will look at the number of sessions where they were added to cart. So out of the 100 times that someone landed on a restaurant that had an ETA of 10 minutes, 60 of them said, yes, press order. So 60% conversion rate is great. Looks like that is a very good conversion rate. And yes, there is a correlation between lower ETAs having higher conversion rates, which is great. The problem with this, though, is we might then want to move all of the 10-minute ETA restaurants to the top of the search results list, right? That's something that you could do with some of the search result tools that we have today. You could artificially bump up certain results and make this a heavier weight if it's a 10-minute ETA restaurant. The problem is we see that 10-minute ETA restaurants are just not that common. And if you think about it, that makes sense. How many restaurants are within 10 minutes of you? Not that many. There's infinitely more restaurants more than 10 minutes away from you. And so while this seems like a really easy way to solve the problem, turns out it doesn't really move the needle enough in the user experience because it's just not a high frequency opportunity. So another mistake a lot of product managers make is they find the really juicy, like always works silver bullet, but it turns out that silver bullet opportunity does not happen that frequently. So it's really important to always use the data to check what is the size of this opportunity. Is this something that if solved 100% of the time would actually move the needle in my business? Because it turns out the amount of times that people will land on a 0 to 10-minute ETA restaurant, it's only 3% of sessions. So great, you solved 3% of orders. Your boss is not going to be very happy with that. So another way I like to visualize this is with a Marimekko chart. The amount of tools that you will have in your toolbox, if you know different types of data visualizations or how to communicate this to your stakeholders, you like instantly, intuitively know the size of this problem just by looking at this now versus my explaining it for like 10 minutes. So if you were to chart on this in Figma or any other like visualization tool, you would be able to plot out a multitude of variables. The bin size, ETA, the failure rate percentage, and how often this happens in the business, where the entire square is all of the business opportunity. And then you would see the real problem to solve for is actually the ETAs greater than 40 minutes. Most restaurants are more than 40 minutes away. Traffic in Jakarta is that bad. And it turns out very few of these are getting converted because when they land on this page, way too far, don't want to wait, move back. And there's just so many of these restaurants that they clutter the search results. Sorry, I guess I should tap on this. All right, so now that you have understood the magnitude of the problem, product managers should then just try to experiment and not think too hard and overcomplicate these experiments, because the best data you can collect is data based on action. When you inflect change on the world, you collect some feedback back, that is the best data to collect. So I'm going to talk a little bit about odds ratio, but we won't get into the math too much. Let's say you have a database, you're collecting every user ID, and you have sent them a new search result listing that lists the ETA. And so whether or not they have seen the search listing with ETA or without ETA, and then the event goal, add to cart. And so this is not part of your event log, it's part of a test log. In the event log, you don't know by the time the user has seen the search result whether or not they have completed the order. So this is not an event stream. Instead, this has to be an analytical exercise later. So you create a bin where you give every user 1 hour from seeing the search results, the first time seeing the search results, to confirming an order. And if they don't add to cart, then you mark that as a 0. If they do, it's a 1. The best way to determine whether or not you are successful in improving your metrics is to then run a test. And then you can do something like an odds ratio test. If you were doing an A/B test, you could also do like a lift calculation or a z-score calculation, but it's dependent on how you have set up your experiment design, what types of users, how clean your test results are. But odds ratio is a really quick, easy way to do this, and it's very impressive when you go to a PM or your boss and you say, hey, I've calculated this magical ratio. I'm looking at the number of times the event happens and the number of times the event does not happen. This is different from probability. Risk ratios would be probability. This is odds. Anyone who is super interested in gambling probably understands this, but hopefully no one is that interested in gambling here, right? Odds of order confirmed then is going to be how many times did someone who saw the new search results, oh, sorry, I'm too far ahead. Number of times the order confirmed event is triggered versus the number of times they do not trigger it within the hour. Odds ratio is going to be the ratio of these two numbers. And if that value is greater than 1, that means, hey, you made a difference. If it's 1, it means you did nothing. If it's less than 1, it means you made it worse. So I usually include this. I don't know if you want to do the math, but everyone has a calculator in their pocket. You can just calculate it. But if it's going to be the odds ratio, what are the numbers that you are calculating? There's not that many options there. I'll skip it because I trust everyone can Google this. Even I don't memorize this sometimes. So you're going to do the odds of order confirmed for users with the new search result with the ETA, and then divide their odds by the odds of the users who did not receive that new experience. And then you will get a 6.3 odds ratio, and that will mean that this new group has 6.3 higher odds than the control group, the users that didn't get any change, to add to cart. And then you could show this to your PM or your boss and say, look, we should totally roll out this feature. Here's how much impact I've had on this business. That is the best way to keep your job as well. So set goals, instrument your data well. Less is more in this case. Just be clean with your data instrumentation, and then run experiments. Make sure you calculate it, do a clean test. That is it. Cool.